Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are tackling something that I think we all kind of struggle with, especially as we move up in our careers,
Yeah,
and that's managing ourselves,
absolutely.
managing yourself. So we are taking an excerpt from the book Ego is the Enemy, and this book digs into how an unchecked ego can really sabotage your success. Have you ever felt like the habits that got you to a certain level might not be the ones to keep you at that level?
Oh, all the time.
That's exactly what this book is all about.
Yeah, for sure. And, we often focus so much on managing other people,
Right.
but this book is saying, hey, you know, as your responsibilities grow, self-management becomes even more important.
It's so true. And to illustrate this point, the book gives two really interesting examples. Dwight Eisenhower, he was a master of organization, and then John DeLorean, whose management style, well, let's just say it wasn't as
A
successful.
little bit different, yeah. It's really fascinating how these two guys, their contrasting approaches really highlight the impact of managing yourself
Yeah.
as your leadership responsibilities expand.
Yeah. Okay, so first up, Eisenhower. I mean, this guy, with his military background, was all about structure and discipline. There's this anecdote in the book about his first night as president.
Okay.
He refuses to open the sealed envelope. He's like, that's what I have a staff for.
Wow.
I mean,
Thought.
talk about delegation.
Yeah, he really understood the power of delegation.
He did. He really did. I think it's a powerful statement about leadership. He recognized that his role wasn't to do everything himself,
Right.
but to empower his team to do it.
Absolutely. He focused on what he called the most important things and trusted his team to handle the rest, which I think is a great takeaway for anyone.
It is.
Even if you're not leading a country,
Right.
delegating effectively and prioritizing those tasks are crucial.
No matter what level you're at.
Yeah, exactly.
But here's my question. How does that level of delegation play into managing your ego?
That's a great question. I think it comes down to humility. It's recognizing that you don't have to do it all yourself. You can trust other people to use their expertise, and by empowering your team,
Yeah.
you create a much more collaborative and ultimately more effective environment.
Totally. Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about John DeLorean. The book describes his management style as chasing colored balloons.
Oh.
What do you think they meant by that?
I think it means constantly getting distracted by new shiny ideas without the focus to actually see things through to completion.
Yeah.
He was always jumping from one thing to the next, and that lack of focus trickled down to the entire company.
Yeah. The book even talks about executives working on their own side projects
Yeah.
during company time. Can you imagine?
I know, it's wild. It just shows how DeLorean's inability to manage himself and maybe even his ego, contributed to a very chaotic work environment.
And ultimately,
Yeah. And ultimately, it led to the downfall of his company,
yeah.
despite his talent and vision.
Yeah, he had some great ideas, but just couldn't execute them.
Right. Couldn't execute.
It's a pretty stark contrast to Eisenhower's approach.
For sure.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, what does this all mean for someone who's listening who may not be a CEO or leading a huge organization?
Well, I think it means that, mastering self-management is super important as you climb the ladder in any field. And it doesn't mean becoming a robot or anything. It just means being really deliberate about the systems that you create for yourself.
Right. So it sounds like it's less about going with the flow and more about making conscious choices about how you work and how you lead.
Yeah, and one of the biggest shifts the book talks about is going from just doing
Yeah.
to making decisions.
Oh, I felt that shift. I mean, you get so used to being in the weeds, getting things done.
Right.
And then at a certain point, you have to take a step back
Right.
and focus on strategy and leadership. It's a real transition.
It is a transition, and a lot of people struggle with it. But if you're constantly stuck in those day-to-day tasks, you lose sight of the big picture.
Totally.
So that's where self-management becomes so critical.
So how do you actually start making that shift?
Hmm.
What are some practical steps people can take?
Well, the book doesn't give, a specific roadmap because everybody's different.
Right.
But one concept they do talk about is readjusting and finding clarity of purpose.
Okay, so what does that look like in real life?
I think it's about taking a step back and asking yourself some hard questions.
Right.
Like, what are my top-level goals?
Yeah.
What are my real priorities?
Okay.
And then crucially, it's about making sure that your actions are aligning with those priorities.
So it's less about doing and more about making sure that doing is actually moving the needle.
Yes, exactly. And this is where the book has this really powerful quote: to produce results and only results.
Wow.
It's so easy to get caught up in being busy
Right.
and looking busy, but are you actually driving those meaningful outcomes?
Hmm. That's a good point. It's not about activity.
Right.
It's about impact.
Exactly.
But how do you know you're focusing on the right things?
Well, the book highlights developing systems to support those priorities. So whether it's a to-do list, a project management tool, or just blocking time on your calendar, you need a system to help you stay focused.
Okay. Systems. Got it.
Yeah.
What else? What other parts of self-management come into play?
But delegation is huge.
Yeah.
And it can be hard, especially for people who like to be in control of everything.
Yeah.
But as you grow and your responsibilities grow,
Uh-huh.
learning to delegate effectively is essential.
So what's the secret to delegating effectively?
I think it all boils down to trust. Trusting your team to do good work. And that trust is built by communicating clearly, setting expectations, and giving feedback.
It makes sense. And I'm guessing that's where managing your ego comes in again.
Exactly. You have to let go of that need to be the one who's doing everything.
Right.
And recognize that sometimes the best way to achieve something is to empower other people to contribute their talents.
Okay. So we've got systems and we've got delegation. Is there anything else that people should keep in mind as they work on their self-management skills?
You know, the book doesn't go into specific tactics too much,
Okay.
but it does stress that mindset is so important. At the end of the day, self-management is as much about your internal dialogue as it is about external systems.
What do you mean by internal dialogue?
I think it's about believing in yourself, believing in your ability to lead and make decisions and reach your goals.
Yeah.
It's about quieting those doubts and fears that we all have
Oh, yeah.
and focusing on your strengths. Because if you believe in yourself
Mm-hmm.
and you have a clear vision and a strong purpose,
Yeah.
you are so much more likely to succeed.
I love that. So it's not just about managing your time and your tasks. It's also about managing your mindset.
It is. It's all connected.
So for our listeners, if you're trying to make that shift from doing to deciding, what's a good first step?
I think a good first step is identifying where your ego might be holding you back.
Okay.
So ask yourself, are you clinging to tasks that you enjoy, even if they're not the best use of your time? Are you afraid to delegate because you think you can do it better yourself? They're tough questions,
Yeah.
but they're important to consider.
It's so true. Sometimes our own ego can be our biggest obstacle.
It really can.
This is making me think of a time when I remember when I first got promoted to a management role, and I was so used to being the one who executed, who got things done.
Yeah.
And suddenly I had to let go of that and
Wonderful.
focus on empowering my team. And it was a real challenge for me, and I definitely made some mistakes along the way.
It's a common experience for sure. And it speaks to the need for self-awareness. And this book has a really interesting point. They say that a fish stinks from the head.
Oh.
It's a vivid analogy, but it really makes you think about, as leaders,
Right.
our actions, our behaviors, our mindset, all of that has a ripple effect.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful image.
It-
So if a leader isn't managing themselves well, if their ego's running wild, that's going to impact the whole team.
Absolutely. We set the tone, and that tone can either elevate or destroy a team.
Yeah.
So self-management is so crucial, not just for your own success, but for the success of everyone around you.
I see what you mean. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about some practical takeaways. What are some specific things that listeners can do to improve their self-management skills, especially as their responsibilities grow?
Well, I think building on what we've been talking about, one key area is prioritization.
Mm-hmm.
It's about figuring out those really important tasks, the ones that will move the needle, and cutting out everything else.
That's so hard, though.
It is.
Because sometimes those less important tasks are the ones that we enjoy more.
Right.
Or the ones that make us feel busy.
Right. Exactly.
But are they really contributing to our goals?
That's the question.
Just
That's the question we need to ask.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? How do we figure out what's really important? Well, having systems in place can be really helpful.
Yeah.
It's about creating structure and discipline, right? So whether it's a to-do list, a project management tool, or just blocking time on your calendar, you need something to help you stay focused.
Okay, so systems for prioritization. Got it. We also talked about delegation earlier.
Yes.
Any other tips for people who might be struggling with that?
I think the key to delegating effectively is communication and trust. So be super clear about what you expect, provide the resources and support they need,
Yeah.
and then step back.
Oh, stepping back is hard.
It is really hard. Micromanaging can actually undermine trust and make people feel less empowered.
That's such a good point. I've definitely been guilty of micromanaging in the past, thinking that I was helping. But,
Mhm.
I probably made things worse.
It's a common trap.
Hmm.
But remember, delegation is about empowering people, not controlling them.
So we've got prioritization, delegation systems in place. Anything else people should focus on when it comes to self-management?
I think a final point to highlight is mindset.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a growth mindset, believing in your ability to learn and adapt as you take on new challenges.
Yeah, so it's about seeing challenges as opportunities for growth, not as these scary obstacles.
Exactly. And it's also about managing your inner critic.
Oh, I have one of those.
We all do.
It can be so loud.
It can. But you have to learn to quiet those voices of self-doubt that can hold you back.
That's so important. I think we all have those voices in our head sometimes, telling us we're not good enough or we're going to fail.
We do.
Mm.
But learning to manage those voices, to challenge those thoughts, that's how we succeed.
So it's about replacing those negative thoughts with something positive, like a belief in your abilities.
Exactly. Shifting that perspective.
So as we're wrapping up this part of the deep dive, I want to circle back to that idea of readjusting and finding clarity of purpose that the book talks about. What does that actually look like in everyday life?
I think it's about taking the time to really reflect on what your goals are, your values, your priorities.
Right.
What is it that you want to achieve? What kind of leader do you want to be?
Right. And are your actions actually lining up with those goals?
Exactly. That's what it's all about.
And sometimes that means letting go of things that are no longer serving you.
Right.
Even if you used to love them or used to be good at them.
Exactly.
It's about being willing to evolve.
Yes. And adapt as things change.
Which brings us back to managing your ego, doesn't it?
It does. Because sometimes our ego wants to cling to old habits or ways of doing things, even when they're not working anymore.
Right.
It can make us resistant to change, even when change is necessary for growth.
So managing your ego is also about being open to new ideas, new ways of doing things.
It is. It's about being humble enough to know that you don't have all the answers,
Yeah.
that you can learn and grow from other people.
And being willing to step outside your comfort zone to embrace new challenges.
Exactly. That's where the magic happens.
This has been such a thought-provoking conversation. It's making me think about all the different ways I can apply these ideas to my own life, not just at work, but also personally.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, self-management is a continuous journey.
Yeah.
It's not about reaching a destination. It's about constantly striving to improve, to be a better leader, both for yourself and for others.
Okay, so if you're ready to start taking some steps to become a better leader, what's one piece of advice that you would give to our listeners?
Start by identifying one area where you can improve your self-management.
Okay.
Maybe it's prioritization, maybe it's delegation, maybe it's working on that mindset.
Pick one thing.
Yeah, pick one thing and focus on making small, consistent changes over time.
Yeah.
Don't try to do everything at once. Just make progress in one area and then build from there.
That's great advice. It's about taking those small steps,
Yeah,
being consistent, and celebrating your progress as you go.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it alone. There are tons of resources out there to help you.
That's true. There are books and podcasts and courses. There's something for everyone.
There is. And don't be afraid to reach out to your mentor or colleagues or even a therapist if you need help navigating the challenges.
That's a great reminder. We don't have to do it all alone. There are people out there who can help.
Absolutely.
Okay, so to wrap up this section of the deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a challenge this week. This week, I challenge you to take some time and reflect on your own management style.
Yeah.
Think about those habits that got you to where you are today. Are those the same habits that are going to take you to the next level?
Right.
Are there things that maybe need to be readjusted? Do you need more clarity, more purpose?
Think back to those examples of Eisenhower and DeLorean.
Yeah.
What resonated with you the most? What kind of leader are you striving to be? Are you more of a get-it-done type of person? Or are you ready for that shift from doing to making decisions?
Yeah. And it's not about being perfect, right?
Yeah.
It's about being self-aware and making those intentional choices.
For sure.
And this is an ongoing thing, right?
Absolutely.
What works for you today might need to be adjusted down the road as you gain experience and responsibility.
That's the beauty of it. It's a constant journey of learning and growth. It's about always challenging yourself to be a better leader for yourself and for others.
So to wrap up this deep dive on managing yourself, let's go back to that quote from the book, "A fish stinks from the head."
Oh,
What kind of head do you want to be?
yeah.
One that inspires people,
Right.
motivates people, or one that creates chaos and dysfunction. It's your choice.
It is.
So much to think about. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling inspired to really look at my own management style and see where I can level up. And remember, this is a journey we're all on together. We're all learning, growing, striving to be the best leaders we can be. So keep those big picture goals in mind.
Yes.
Remember those systems to help you prioritize.
Absolutely.
And don't be afraid to delegate and let your team really shine.
So important.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading with purpose.
Yeah.